Trans-Pacific Partnership. So there is a lot of things going on that really required our attention. In my particular case, from Costa Rica, what I regret in a way is that we didn't look into Asia many years ago. We should have started long time ago.
Thank you for the questions and also the answer. Any more questions? Okay. Yes, please.
Your Excellency, thank you for the interesting talk. I'm Sakul Bahikamuddin. I'm an in-house reporter for this university. I was wondering, what is it about the people and society of Costa Rica that is different from the other countries in the region where there have been many revolutions and changes in government, and yet in Central America, I mean, Central and South America, and yet Costa Rica had, the last time they had war was in 1949, but since then, as you mentioned there, you have abolished the military, and how is it that you can maintain peace without a standing army? What is it about the people that they don't rebel, or the authorities, there are no leaders who try to stage a coup? How is it that they're different from the rest of Latin America? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's something that I've been asked many times, and I'm not sure I have a complete answer, but I will try to touch on some aspects. Some historians even refer to the colonial times and the lack of population that we had at that time, the lack of natural resources. There was gold, in particular, in other places that was a cost of conflict in the colonial times. We didn't have any of that. So it was a peaceful territory and highly unpopulated at that time. But in more recent time, I would say that what has made it different from other countries, one factor is the investment on human capital, or human development, human talent. I don't like to call it human capital because it sounds too mercantilistic to say, at least. So the investment on health and education allowed people to develop, and that's one factor that made the society different. One consequence of that is that our middle class is quite broad. In other countries, the extremes are very clear. Just a few families in particular controlling most of the economy, having a very strong presence in the political, the economic sector. In our case, wealth is more diversified. The extremes are not that clear or that deep. Also, of course, the non-existence of the army, which some of what I'm saying is a consequence of the non-existence of the army. And you mentioned the civil conflict that we had in 1948, and it's very important to refer to that. What happened at that time is that the party that was in government tried not to recognize the result of the elections that had been won by the opposition. So a civil movement developed in order to enforce on the government the respect of the results of the election. It was not a state coup. It was very different in nature. It was not to overthrow the incumbent government, but to respect the result of the elections. And what happened there is that an interim government was formed, which was in power for 18 months. And instead of perpetuating themselves in government, as has happened in many other cases, they made the conditions to transfer the power to that person that had been freely elected in the 1948 elections. And they took the bold decision of abolishing the army. Constitutionally speaking, the abolishment is very clear and in the Constitution of 1949, but it was that interim government that were the leaders or were the winners of this conflict that used armed forces to fight against the government in order to respect the results of the elections that actually abolished the army. I don't know if I explained myself clearly, but they had in other situations they would have all the temptation to stay in power and to reinforce the military and armed forces. And they actually left 18 months later, as they had promised, and they took the bold decision of abolishing the army. So I think it's a combination of factors. Nobody in our current society would even consider having an army or establishing an army in Costa Rica. I'll just try to briefly explain an anecdote that happened to me with my children. I was, many years ago, I was an ambassador in Geneva before they were in organizations, UN organizations. And we moved there, and just a couple of weeks after moving there, I was driving with my family, and we made a stop. There was a truck in front of my car. The doors opened. It was a military truck, and soldiers started to come down from the truck. And my children were like, with their eyes open, and said, "Dad, you said this was a safe country." It was for the first time in their life that they were seeing a soldier, and they felt threatened. That's the way we think. That's the way we behave. We cannot consider, not even as a remote possibility, having an army.
Thank you for the questions and also the answers. Does anyone has any more questions? Okay, so you first.
Your Excellency, my name is Ashraf. On behalf of the students from University National of Malaysia, I'd like to personally welcome you to our great university. Your Excellency, you did say about Costa Rica government putting forward women as one of the candidacy for the United Nations Secretary General position. I am very surprised that this happens, and I would really like to congratulate you because I think this is aligned with Malaysia policy for gender equality. My question is, how optimistic are you that a woman from Costa Rica can win over the seats, and how do you wish to send this positive message of equality in gender to other Central American countries?
Just a clarification, we don't have a country. We have been aiming for the possibility, for the member states to consider in a very serious way the possibility of electing a woman, regardless of nationality and regardless, geographic distribution. We are not aiming for this because we have a country. Nevertheless, if asked, we have also very capable women who can easily be part of it. Just to give you an example, the secretary of the Environmental Climate Convention, Cristiana Figueres, who's ending her post in June, is a Costa Rican. And I'm not saying this, apparently everybody recognizes that she did a good work, and she's a very capable woman. But we don't have this position because we are aiming to present her as a candidate. If that happens, that's a separate story, but it has nothing to do. We started with this position many months ago, trying to lobby and convince other member states, and also to lobby with the P5, the permanent members of the Security Council, to have a more transparent process, election process. So I think it would be a good example for the world. It's not, it doesn't matter the nationality. It's time that it's an institution that was formed 70 years ago and preaches a lot about gender equality, human rights, women's empowerment. So why not to have this discussion very clearly and very straightforward? That's what we think.
Okay, thank you for the answer.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies. I would like to first welcome you to Malaysia. So my question, basically two questions to actually ask Your Excellencies. Basically, it relates to legitimate defense and also security. So as Your Excellencies have mentioned just now, whereby Your Excellencies do not support excessive military spending. So my question is, how does Costa Rica put into play its diplomacy relationship with these countries? Are there any pressure that are put into these countries, especially in relations to dealing with them in diplomatic means? And my second question is that, as far as we're concerned, the European Union has a lot of pressure in dealing with refugee issues. So my question is, does Costa Rica face this particular problem as well? And in that event, how effective is the resettlement programs with a comprehensive approach to the solutions, and how does that change or alter the disarmed democracy that Your Excellencies have actually mentioned? Thank you.
Thank you. We don't put a specific pressure on the specific countries. These are positions that we defend in the context of the regional groups and the multilateral organizations and the General Assembly and the working groups, in general, to call the attention about the consequences or the positive consequences of disarmament and the negative consequences of spending irrationally on military aspects. As I said before, we respect the considerations and the needs of other countries and other regions, but we also think that we are not going to be naive. Probably complete disarmament is not going to be feasible, it's not going to be possible. In particular, in these times that we find so strong non-state actors that are causing a lot of problems around the world. So it's a matter of how to attend stability, security, defense, and I'm talking about terrorism, but and when I talk about non-state actors, I basically refer to ISIS and that kind of organizations, how to deal with it. I'm talking about what we talk about is we are not singling out the specific countries. I think that everybody knows what they do and what are the reasons by doing so. We are not preachers or telling any other country what to do. What we explain, and what I have tried to explain today, for instance, is that without military spending, you can succeed as a country, and you can go in the right direction. We have a lot of challenges. I'm not saying that we don't have them. We have a lot of challenges, but those challenges are not going to be resolved by military spending. Actually, we are better off, that's the way we consider, we are better off to solve and attend those challenges by not spending military things than by doing so. So if anybody or any other country would like to know more about our experience and our practices, we're very much willing to share it and to help, but we are not imposing any system on anybody.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions and also the answers. Does anyone have any more questions? Okay, yes, please.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency. Thank you for coming to UKM, to grace our place. And thank you, and welcome to the other ambassadors as well. I'm Richard Mason from the Institute of Merchant and International Studies, IGMAS. My question is not a substantive question, but I'm curious about your portfolio. You're the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Washing. Yeah? If you can illuminate, enlighten us as to the connection between the two, and how perhaps your country, the structural governance of your country. Thank you.
That's a very interesting question. I still make myself the same question quite often, because you don't find that relation in many countries. Actually, Don Marcos, I think in Argentina is called the same, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Worship. Well, we are a very open society in terms of religious affiliations or cult. That's something that we respect. What I have to do, or what my ministry has to do, is to deal with the different religious groups that basically have, in some cases they have incentives, not incentives, but immunities, special diplomatic protection. So I have to deal with that. In the past, the government used to finance or to give tax breaks, in particular to the Catholic Church. We are a Catholic country by majority, and my ministry had to deal with the relation with the Catholic Church. But that has changed dramatically since 1949, when the new constitution established this thing. So nowadays it's more protocolary approach. We are not giving money or finance. There are still some exceptions that apply not only to the Catholic Church but to other religious movements. They are treated in a particular way in terms of taxation in some cases, and that's what it includes. But it's basically in that regard. We don't enter in any substantive negotiation or positions, or we are very open and we try not to mingle.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions and also the answers. I have a few questions. So my question is that first, I'm very interested about the case of Costa Rica against Nicaragua. So could Your Excellency enlighten us actually what are the environmental damages that are being outlined in the case itself? And my second question is that why initially Costa Rica wanted to bring this case to the Organization of American States instead of ICJ? And will it change the wording or whatsoever? And my last question is that the Kenya-Harris Treaty, with the treaty itself, it was established in 1858, right? So throughout the establishment of the treaty itself, it seems to us that the Nicaragua seems to object and also, does not compromise well with the treaty itself. So, as in 1998 and also 2010, there's quite a number of disputes and so on. So, does Your Excellency feel that this treaty should be amended, or there's any thing that we can do in order to avoid such disputes between Costa Rica and also Nicaragua, so that the relations between these two countries can be strengthened? Yeah, that's my question.
Thank you. I think the treaty is a good treaty. It was complemented by different awards, by arbitration. It was complemented on different occasions. One of the most important was an award rendered by the President of the United States, as I said. So I think the treaty is clear. What happens is that sometimes parties, in our case, our neighbor, is very creative in its interpretation. And that is what causes problems. And that is, when that happens, is when you put at risk the confidence and the trust between the two countries. So the treaty is a good treaty, I think it's clear, but we have to, when you sign a treaty or a contract of any type, you are a law student, you know that good faith is a sine qua non requirement of the treaty or the contract to succeed and to be successfully implemented. You can sign the best treaty with all regulations and try to foresee the future 1,000 years from now, but if there is no good faith, it's not going to work. The environmental issues that I referred to, basically they started the building of some canals in order to shorten the distance to go out to the Caribbean Sea through the San Juan River. They tried to cut through our territory. That's why they invaded that small portion that I referred to in order to make it faster and easier to go to the Caribbean Sea. And in doing that, they had to cut a lot of trees. They had to do a lot of damage to the terrain, which is a wetland. It was protected by Ramsar. It had been registered by my country within the Ramsar Convention about 20 years ago. And they did that not only in one case, but with 3 different canals in violation of the provisional measures of 2011. So this is a very good precedent because this is one of the first times, if not the first, that the International Court of Justice grants a country the possibility of claiming compensation for environmental damage. It's a very, very important precedent. They said that we have to negotiate with Nicaragua in good faith for the next 12 months. Well, started last December, and if we don't reach an agreement, the court will set the compensation amount. We don't plan to become a rich country at the expense of Nicaragua. That's not what I'm saying, but they must be responsible and they have been held liable for what they did. And the evidence was before the court, and that's why they were condemned. Going to the Organization of American States, as the name says, is the Organization of American States. It's a regional organization that is supposed to deliver good results and to work in a try to build common positions for the hemisphere. And unfortunately, the result, it didn't work out. It's very easy to oppose to the claims or the requests of other countries when they have a difficult situation. So it was quite disappointing. It was not the first time that the organization fails to deliver, but it was the first, regional multilateral organization that we decided to take the case, and we saw that there was not going to be a good resolution. We had to move to the International Court of Justice, which takes a lot of money and takes a lot of time. These kind of issues could have been decided and resolved in good manner, in good faith within the organization at a much lesser cost and less time consuming.
Thank you very much for the answers. Honorable guests, members of the floor, to proceed, I would like to invite Professor Dato' Insinyur Dr. Rizal Atik Abdullah Okey Rahmat, Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic and International Affairs of University Kebangsaan Malaysia, and His Excellency Manuel Gonzalez Sanz, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica, to exchange tokens of appreciation as a sign of friendship between Malaysia and Costa Rica.